Hey guys, this is the start of yet another project, and this time it's going to be one of those RCA 721 TS's I picked up recently. So if you watched the earlier installment on these TVs, I found one off of Craigslist that I was able to get working pretty well without having to replace any components, and I want to use that as a model. Now this one I got from a video camera member who had done work on it, but I don't think he got it completely working. So I'm going to take a whack at it. I really don't know the details of how far he got with things, but it certainly did a full recap. I'll show you underneath, and had to replace some of the power resistors in here. Now one of the things I'm curious about with these sets is restuffing these caps, and I can see that he tried to, but wasn't able to get these cardboard covers off. So I figured this would be a good set to do some experimenting on, because at least one of the others is so original, I'd really like to preserve it as much as possible. I mean, the one I got off Craigslist, I mean, everything is still good, even as the original good power resistors in here, all the original caps underneath. So I popped one of these caps out. It's easy enough. These are all insulated from the chassis, which makes it a bit easier to get out because none of these twist lock lugs are soldered onto the chassis. Sometimes they're with a big glob and you got to use a heat gun to melt them out. These are all in these phenolic wafers, so you and most of them don't have any wires going to these twist lock tabs, so you just have to straighten them out. And he'd already cut off the wires because he put the new caps underneath, so I just had to straighten these out and pop the cap out. So then I tried getting the cover off. Now I've had some good luck in the past with just heating them up, either with a heat gun or toss them in the oven for a while, and they're held on with tar. The tar softens up, you slide the cover off, slice them open, put in the new caps, put the cardboard cover back over, pop it back in the set. However, these are different. I heated it up and I very quickly could tell that nothing was happening. So I just tore or peeled off the cardboard. Now I can see why. These aren't held on with tar, they're held on with some kind of glue. And there's no way to get these covers off without destroying them. Especially around the base, there's a lot of glue. So what I'm going to do is pop online and see if I can get some cardboard tubes the right diameter. It's so annoying that the common toilet paper, paper towel rolls are a little bit too big to fit over these. So I'm going to measure that diameter and see if I can pick some up. And then it's just a matter of practicing a bit doing these rolls. I've done some in the past where I've either taken a paper towel roll and made a slice in it and rolled it tighter, or even just taking some paper packing tape and just making my own tubes from scratch. So it looks like at the end what they would do is, these are all gone, but there'd be a cardboard disc in here, and then they knurl the edges over, crimp it with some glue, and then paint the things black. So I'm going to try to get adept at reproducing those. Meanwhile, I'm going to slice this open and see if I can easily mount the new caps inside. Let's take a look underneath. Oh, he also replaced the anode lead, which is nice. I don't recall if he posted about this on video camera or not. He was moving, and I can fully understand wanting to lighten the load before he moved out west. But it looks like he did a pretty complete job under here of replacing all the paper caps, and here's the electrolytics. Like, here's the one I took out, and here's the two caps. So certainly a fine technique. Lots of guys have done it. Electrically very sound, but I'd like to restuff these if possible, for no other reason than when I compare the sets, I can match up the wiring. He also went so far as to replace some of the mica caps, which is not a bad idea. When I did my RCA 630 TS, which is similar design and vintage, I ended up replacing pretty much all the mica caps because they'd gone bad. Well, I just couldn't find any paper tubes of the right size at a reasonable price It's just a shade under 1.5 inches, like 1 7/16. I found some craft mailing tubes. The problem is, minimum quantity was like 70, and it come out to a range of like 40 to 60 bucks depending on where I would shop. Well, I just need like 1 or 2 of them. So I did a little more searching and stumbled across this site on how to make your own, and it actually is pretty simple, and I had most of the materials on hand, so I'm going to give it a try. So I got a piece of poplar. It's a little under 1.5 inches. I call it 1.5 inches in diameter, but when I measured it's a little bit less, so it's just what I wanted. And roll it around that. Trick though is to how do you wind it? Well, the tips I got was, given the diameter, about the size to use to wrap it around, which turned out to be about 3 inches. And how do you do it so it doesn't stick to the thing that you wrap it around? How do you get even layers? Well, the deal is, for the first layer, just use plain old paper. So I picked up a roll of this masking paper in the painting supplies section. Wider than I wanted. It would have been awesome if I could get a roll that was like 3 inches in width, but I got a wider one. Well, I just slit some strips down the length. Easy enough. And then you wrap it around the dowel so it's just touching. And put a piece of tape at either end. And then the next layer, you use some adhesive. So this will prevent it from sticking to the material. PVC, metal. I couldn't find those in the right diameter, so wood was the only thing I could find, so that's what I went with it. It was inexpensive anyways. Now for the next layer, I could do like the website showed and take some Titebond wood glue and dilute it and brush it on some more of these plain paper strips. However, I happen to have a roll of backing tape that's about 3 inches in width, and it's pre-gummed. So all I got to do now is get a sponge and dampen this up, and then wrap it around and do maybe 2 layers of this, maybe 3, see. And I'll wait for it to dry and slide this off, and then chop off pieces as needed. Here's the results of my first attempt. So 1 layer of the plain paper and then 3 layers of the packing tape. Pretty happy with the results. It's a little soft. I'm thinking once this dries more it'll get stiffer. The most difficult part was actually getting it off the tube. Not because any adhesive got stuck to it, but I wasn't thinking. What I should have done was sealed this wood first. This is just raw poplar. So I'm going to lightly sand it, shoot on some sanding sealer, lightly sand it a little bit more. It's pretty smooth as it is, but even so, a little bit of friction because I wrapped this really tight, makes it kind of tough to get off. I've been reviewing things underneath the chassis a bit more closely, and there's one more thing I want to do before I try powering it up, and that is replace this guy and this guy. These are AC line bypass caps right off of the AC interlock going to ground. 0.01 microfarad shown here in the schematic. Those have a tendency to fail, sometimes rather catastrophically. They should either be clipped out, as they're not necessary for the operation of this set. They're there to get noise off the line, but you can certainly power it up without them or replace them with capacitors rated for use on the AC line. Here are those 2 new safety caps installed. I then expanded to checking stuff in this area, which is horizontal output tube. I'm going to fly back down in there, and I believe that's horizontal oscillator tube. 3 main things I like to check in a TV. You got the power supply, so we have the transformer here, 5U4 rectifier, and then all the filter caps down in here. And the horizontal, which is down here, produces a high voltage and horizontal deflection on the screen, and the vertical, which produces the vertical deflection on the screen. And of course they're all interrelated. Without the power supply you don't get anything. Without the horizontal you don't get high voltage no image on the screen, nor do you get horizontal deflection, and quite often there's a signal pulled out of the horizontal to provide a boost voltage for the vertical, and without the vertical of course you don't get any vertical deflection. So I started checking circuitry around in here, and I found the resistors were way off. Like 2 or 2.5 times their stated value. Like the 47 ohm here was over 100 ohms. So I just went ahead and replaced all those. Also noticed that he had put a 303 1600 volt cap in there, and that would be 0.03 microfarad. However, my reference set and the schematic show a 0.05, rated at I think 400 volts or 600 volts. So I put in a 0.047, closest modern equivalent, rated for 630 volts. Field. So I don't have a photo of what it looked like before he worked on it, but it could very well be that there was an old repair and they put a 0.03 in there, and he was simply replacing what he saw with new values. I don't think there were any production changes that would have gone to a 0.03, but something to keep a note of in case there are problems. Perhaps that should be a 0.03, but I'm fairly confident that that will be the correct value. And I just received a little parts order from Allied Electronics with parts I'll need to finish off this set and the other two 721s. I just finished installing the last of the rebuilt electrolytics, so I'm finally ready for a power-up test. Now, while I was installing these, I did spot check a few resistors, and every one I've tested so far just about has been off, and off quite a bit. I already mentioned I replaced some down in here. I'm going to end up having to go through this whole chassis and replace quite a few, but I generally design these sets to run a pretty wide tolerance, and even when they're off 2 or more times the stated value, it should still function to some extent. So I'm going to flip this down, make sure all the debris is out of there from little bits of solder and wire. And I'm going to dig up a test CRT and install it. And cheater cord. And I think then that will be ready. So here's all the electrolytics. I will be fabricating those cardboard covers to hide them, but no point in doing that till the thing actually works. One problem with using these test CRTs is they do kind of flop around because there's nothing to hold it in place. Yeah, the image looks better now than it did before, I think, because this was probably pulled out a bit. And see how the focus changes when I slide it in and out. It's because that focus coil on there, this is auto-focusing, it does not need a focus coil. So I think that would be contrast, and this would be brightness. There's some centering controls on the back. That would be height. It's vertical centering, horizontal centering. It's already pegged all the way. Like so. Alright, so next up I'm going to take this off and put it to the side. You can't disconnect it entirely, but you can certainly move it out of the way. See that also has a big effect on centering. Alright, let's give that another try without the focus coil. Wires aren't long enough, but it's very easy to unmount and just set it to the side. Much better. And the picture is now such that I think I can center it horizontally. Yes. the greatest picture, but that could just be because I got bad reception. Figure that out by feeding a stronger signal. Alright, let's see how it looks my Suncor VG91. I'll get this back to channel 3. Oh, there's a nice grid pattern. Linearity. It's pretty darn good as is, but I'll tweak it a little bit. So how about some sound? Well, let's see. A hunk of dust test tones. Oh yeah, here it is. Well, not hearing anything. Let's see about fine tuning. No. Alright, well now I am inclined to blame the TV. Perhaps it needs a bit of an alignment. Let's try different channels. So it's 3, 4, 5, 6, and then let's try 7. Or not. Peculiar. Let's try 9. I just didn't have the gain up high enough. Gain being a contrast. Still not hearing any sound. Alright, I'm inclined to think that TV's got some issues. Now obviously we heard some sound when I was on channel 6 over the air, but it's not that loud. This should be exceedingly loud. There's a very strong sound carrier on this channel. Even just a little tweak of this, I should be able to hear it very loudly. Alright, so I can certainly go through and do an alignment. Also, I want to check all the tubes before I do an alignment and check all those resistors. I mentioned that there were a lot that seemed questionable. And I got this fired up. Go back to channel 3. I want to see what the bandwidth is like. So let's go multi-burst. Pretty good. These sets don't have as good a bandwidth as an RCA 630 TS. The 621, 721, they made a few little compromises in the design, but that's pretty good. You can see some fine stripes up to here. If you can see fine lines up here, you get a full 4.5 megahertz bandwidth, and almost no TV can do that. When you see a lot of bending up at the top, that means the local horizontal oscillator is pretty far off frequency, and it takes it a while to get pulled in. So the first few scan lines are skewed off. When adjusting the horizontal hold, notice it gets kind of locked in around there. But I'm almost all the way at one side when it's doing that. So I should tweak the internal oscillator. There's a slug in there you can turn, such that when I'm in about the center of this horizontal hold, right about here, those lines should be pretty straight up and down at the top. Otherwise, this set's working pretty good. Now, I can't take credit for much of that because somebody else did the lion's share of the recapping and the work. I just need to go through now and hopefully just some final tweaks and adjustments, replace some bad resistors, perhaps I need to do an alignment, check for weak tubes, and I can call this set done.